Yes.
Yeah, so yes.
Okay.
Do you want to start or should I?
Um, I will. That's fine. So today we're talking about a ghost town. I guess you would call it a ghost town. Um,
Mhm.
in New Jersey called Ong's Hat. Uh, the legends say that um, a group of, or not really a group, a pair, I guess would be the best way to put it. A pair of scientists discovered the means for interdimensional travel, and it's located in said Ong's Hat. Um,
Yes.
that's that's where it starts.
At like the highest level, that's where this starts.
Yeah,
So I guess maybe just to give you guys a little bit of background about Ong's Hat. It's in New Jersey. It's in a place called the Pine Barrens. And it's like this huge expanse of forest. And uh at one point there were small but thriving
Can we get down?
communities. I mean, people have populated this area for thousands of years. Um, and there's a lot of like culture and heritage. But at some point, these smaller towns started losing their populations. And so now there's like a bunch of hiking trails that go through. You can find a lot of remnants of these smaller towns, ghost towns where they've been abandoned, or there's rubble, ruin from when these towns existed. So Ong's Hat is in the Pine Barrens and is one of these ghost towns.
right.
Um, yeah.
Also, fun fact: the Pine Barrens is where the Jersey Devil is supposed to reside.
Yes. Apparently, there are actually a lot of myths and legends, and kind of like infamous people and stories uh that happen in the Pine Barrens. A lot more than I realized.
Oh yeah, it's a popular um, setting, I guess,
Mhm.
for local legends and stuff. Um,
Yeah, and there's also, like, murders and disappearances and, like, I guess you could say that for a lot of places, but I feel like there's a lot of them condensed into this area.
yeah, I don't know if I wonder if there's a reason for it, because I was reading this legend or this topic, whatever you want to call it, um, and they were saying the surrounding area around Ong's Hat has almost like a Blair Witch vibe, you know.
Really?
Um, so like even as you're walking towards where Ong's Hat is, I think there's like a road called like Ong's Hat Road or something like that.
Mhm.
That it just kind of gives you this like eerie feeling, um, almost like
That's
I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of roads out there that are said to be haunted.
yeah,
Um, and so it kind of seems like it's almost developed its own ghost story. So
yeah. It just has, like, a vibe or, like, an aura about
right,
it.
right,
Yeah, that's so interesting. Huh. Also, fun fact, they grew a lot of cranberries and blueberries there.
all right, all right. Not
Which kind of
only
cuts through that mystery aura, but fun fact, they do produce a lot of blueberries and
all
cranberries.
right, not only do they have the means for interdimensional travel, they're solving urinary tract infections one cranberry at a time.
Yep, and antioxidant. Is that
Antioxidant
what
city.
blueberries do? Have
Yes,
antioxidants?
yes, they do.
Yeah. So that's
Okay,
that's kind of like the setting of where this happens.
right.
So it's already in an area that kind of has these weird vibes. There's a lot of history behind it and a lot of other strange myths and legends associated with the area.
Yeah, I mean, even just how the town of Ong's Hat got its name is a little weird. Um, did you come across how it got its name?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of
It's
goofy.
really goofy.
Yeah, and I was surprised by how many people talked. So like when I was doing research and reading articles, a lot of articles start with how the town was named, and it kind of like I don't know if people are interested in that or not, but it's the story doesn't really fit together with the Ong's Hat like legend. I
No,
don't know.
it really doesn't. It doesn't. So okay, so we're sitting here talking about how it got its name. We're going to tell you how it got its name. So apparently, back in I believe it was the 1700s, right?
Mhm.
This dude with the last name of Ong, apparently it was a popular name back then. Um, he was a bit of a player, a bit of a ladies' man, and he was known for his silk hat. And so I guess he was found out by a jealous lover, and she got really mad, and so she stomped the hat. And so he got really mad that she stomped his silk hat, his famous silk hat, and so he threw it into a tree. And that's how the town got its name.
It's such like it's such an odd story.
It's very odd, especially when you're like, okay, what does this have to do with interdimensional travel? You know, like it
Yeah.
doesn't mesh, it doesn't fit together. It's very goofy, like you said, it's
I guess
very goofy.
it's just a historical tidbit. It really doesn't have anything to do with the Ong's Hat myth. Um, the myth, the legend, urban legend is just named after this location,
Right,
and the location has a goofy town name.
right.
So I don't know.
I guess for me the interesting thing is that no matter which article you, or at least of the majority of articles and videos that I found, um, they all, like you said, they all start with it,
For
and
some reason.
it it doesn't fit with the rest of the article.
Mhm.
Like it
But
doesn't
ult
make sense.
Yeah, but ultimately, I mean, you get a historical tidbit. Uh, why is it named Ong's Hat, you may ask? Well, there's your answer. And but yeah, it has nothing to do with the actual urban legend, beside being named for the area.
Okay, do we want to jump into like little bit more in depth about the legend itself?
Uh yeah.
Okay,
So I kind of want to start it off by talking about its history, if that's
okay,
okay.
okay.
So I mentioned before I hopped on with Tin Man that this urban legend has been around for a long time. So it was one of the first like big urban legends to hit the internet
Hmm.
to circulate around the internet. Um, so it popped up or started popping up like in the 80s through like paper mailers. Like that's when it started, this Ong's Hat myth started appearing. And then with the introduction of the internet, it started circulating. So again, this has been around for a really long time. And even the some of the articles that I was reading, I mean, there people are still talking about it, right? They're still writing articles and putting out information about this legend. So I think that's really cool that it's been around so long.
Yeah, it's like 3 decades or so that this legend has been around. Because, like you said, it started
Mhm.
in the '80s, and it really didn't start to like fizzle until the late 1990s and early 2000s. So it's almost like 3 decades that it's been, like you said, circulating and being talked about, and things are, so obviously some of the information out there is a little bit uh, uh, not. I mean, the whole thing's weird, but like it doesn't fit with the original um, idea, right?
Mhm.
And so some of it is you can clearly see it's clearly like tacked on, um, but like yeah, it's been around for the longest time. It's like you said, it's one of the one of the oldest internet sensations, I guess.
Yeah.
Message boards,
Mhm.
videos, articles, everything you can imagine. People were talking about it. It's like a local thing. Kids still apparently go there to this day to see what they can find or anything like that. So it's definitely had a lasting impact on not just the internet community conspiracies, like the internet conspiracy communities, but the locals too.
Hmm.
So it's not just some random one-off thing.
Yeah. So I mentioned that it started popping up in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So what started this whole thing was a piece of literature. Um, and later with the internet, the pages were scanned, people could look at them, but it was like an actual like paper pamphlet. And it was called Ong's Hat: Gateway to the Dimensions. So if you take a look at, I'll show it on my screen. I think I have the, oh, maybe I don't have the actual one up. I'll try and find it. But basically, it was this pamphlet. It was like in full color. And the pamphlet was put out by the Institute of Chaos Studies and Moorish Science Ashram,
Yes.
which is quite a mouthful.
Yes.
Um, but basically, the gist was that there was this ashram in Ong's Hat, and they were studying these chaos sciences, and trying to develop new discoveries. And they just lived and worked in the middle of the Pine Barrens in this like in the ghost town of Ong's Hat, right?
Yeah, I mean it's so what's the best way to put this? So like you said, they're trying to develop the chaos studies or chaos theory or something like that. I think it's kind of like interchangeable. Um, but the Moorish. So do you know about the Moorish?
No.
Okay, so Moorish is well. Okay, so there's this big thing going on now. Well, not necessarily now, but it's kind of like it's been propping up more recently. Is these Moorish sovereign citizens, right?
Hmm.
And so basically, they think or they believe that based on I can't remember what uh, the name of the thing is, but it's like some kind of common law book, right? That they
Hmm.
found, and basically what they do is they believe that they are afforded all rights of citizenship, but they don't have to follow any of the laws of America. Does it make
Okay.
sense?
Yes.
So like the Moorish I was what I'm trying to get at is I don't know if the I don't know if these Moorish sovereign citizens have any connection to the Moorish ashram oh, ashram
Ashram.
yeah however you say it.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get at is like
Okay.
I read that they were Moorish and I was like, oh great, these guys. um
Yeah, I don't know a lot about them, to be honest.
okay,
I think that's it's a little bit past what I
what
can
you were able
talk
to
about. I think that if um people want to look it up, basically, yeah, it was members of this Moorish ashram who what they broke off and started living in Ong's Hat. Isn't
mhm,
that is that's kind of what happened, and then they formed this new ashram,
okay,
right?
yes,
Okay.
sorry,
So, I mean, the yeah, the yes.
okay,
I don't know a lot about the original group that broke off to move to Ong's Hat,
okay,
the
but
Moorish. Yeah.
either way they went there to study these sciences, chaos theories, um, in hopes to in hopes to uh, discover new means of travel. They were just
Yeah,
so
I think the
big.
the goal of what they were doing was they were performing experiments to try and their theory was that the human brain was capable of more than we thought it was capable of, essentially. It's
Okay.
sort of like unlocking the brain's hidden potential. So that's kind of what the scientists were doing. And
Right.
this was led, so there was you had this ashram, but as part of the ashram, there were two scientists called the Dobbs twins. And I guess they were kind of the lead on this project. But they were a pair of Princeton scientists who left
I
because
think they were
apparently
kicked out.
they were kicked out because their thoughts and theories were like too extreme, or the experiments they ran were not like, it wasn't quite
Kosher. It
yeah,
wasn't.
yeah,
It wasn't.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, basically that's they start performing these experiments, and what they end up developing is this thing called the egg. Do you wanna talk about the egg?
Yes. So the egg is um basically okay. So what's the best way to describe it so that I can get a picture in someone's head, almost like
The
a.
egg. I think I have a picture of it.
But it doesn't exactly look like an egg. Like from the
It's
side, it
kind
kind
of
of looks
like
like
an
an egg,
egg.
but not like it doesn't look like a chicken egg to me. To me, it looks more um like some kind of
It's sort of like a womb.
yeah, like a womb
Which I guess
or
that's what an egg is,
I mean
but
technically.
it is vaguely egg-shaped.
I would almost say it looks more like a what are those hyperbolic sleep chambers.
Yeah, well, I think that's what it was supposed to be. It's like a sense deprivation chamber, is that what they're called?
Yeah, sensory
Or just
deprivation.
yeah, sensory deprivation chamber. So that's essentially what it is. It's like a small confined space
Right,
that they developed to I don't know what they did inside of it, but it was to unlock their brain's hidden potential, essentially.
right.
Yeah.
And with that, they, I guess they put someone inside, and he, the whole thing left, right? The person that was inside, and the chamber itself like disappeared.
Yeah. Just
And
like out of thin air, just
right, and I think it was 7
disappeared.
minutes. If I recall, 7 minutes that it was gone, and then it came back, and the guy was like, "Hey, look, check it. Right, I found this new dimension. Like that's where it took me was a new dimension." And so from there, they started experimenting more, right? And and yeah, they apparently found interdimensional travel by way of an egg.
Yeah. Basically, they described it as a parallel Earth,
Right, parallel Earth where
where
humans hadn't they hadn't.
they didn't exist.
Yeah,
It
I
was
was
just
trying to think
Earth
of what.
without humans.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, Earth without humans. That sounds like it would be interesting.
Yes. So apparently, there exists a parallel Earth without humans, which I guess makes sense if you believe in the um, parallel dimension theories.
Right,
I
like the
think most of
multiverse.
them say there's basically an infinite amount of parallel dimensions, and
Right,
anything you can think of exists in one of those.
right. It stands to reason that there would be a universe or a dimension where the Big Bang or what have you, whatever you believe in, didn't happen.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it's like the statistics would say that it would happen.
Yeah.
Probability.
So basically they develop this egg, they discover, interdimensional parallel travel. And what ends up happening is there's not an accident, but an event that happens. So there's a nuclear accident that happens at a military base near where Angshat is located, and there is, the potential for radiation poisoning.
Right.
So authorities are sent out to make sure that everyone's cleared, and they discover the Angshat facility. But instead of vacating the area, what ends up happening is supposedly they use the egg to transport all of their buildings, belongings, whatever it is that they deemed essential, one by one to this alternate parallel universe. So
Right.
they
They
just up
just
and bail.
bounce.
They
They
just
just
leave.
bounce. We're out.
Instead of risking people discovering what they're working on.
Right. But the interesting thing to me, when you mentioned that they took the egg and left, right? They did went to the other dimension. Um, is that apparently the gate, I guess, or whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
is supposedly still there today. Um,
I
so
think they left a building there to house the egg when they came back, and that's what
right,
you're talking about, right? Kind of
right.
that
But
gate.
what I'm getting at is if they were worried, or if they didn't want anybody to find their stuff, they did a pretty bad job if they left it behind. Make
Well,
sense?
they left a building. I don't think anything was in the building. It was
Oh,
just
okay,
like a
okay,
location for the egg to land
okay,
when it travels. I think.
okay, okay. Fair enough.
From my understanding, I think that
Fair,
was the
fair
case.
enough. I guess I misread it. Then that's fine.
But I mean, just the building being there is proof that proof that this happened or that they existed, right?
Right,
There is at least someone doing something there. They left traces of their work behind.
right.
Yeah.
So so now that we've given a overview of the legend itself, do we want to go to the next step?
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
You want me to do the honors?
Yeah, you can do the honors.
All right. So everything that we just talked about and described is not true.
It's a big old hoax.
It is a huge hoax. So, I mean, we talk a lot about conspiracies, about a lot of conspiracies and urban legends and myths. So, obviously, they are things where you don't know if they're true or not, right?
Right.
There's no viable evidence. So, there are people who believe and people who don't. But you really can't prove it one way or another, right? When you talk about Bigfoot, he could exist, he could not exist, but there's like
He
not
exists.
proof either way,
He
right?
exists.
He exists.
Yeah, he exists.
If you guys haven't watched our Bigfoot episode,
Definitely do it. It's a good one.
that's a good one. So definitely check it out. But this one, I was going to say definitively, but this myth went on for years and years and years and kept growing, getting bigger, more people got involved, and it became this huge story. But ultimately, there was one guy who was behind a lot of the like big advances in evidence of this legend,
Mhm.
who came out and specifically said, hey guys, this has gone on a long time. I'm tired of doing this. I'm just gonna come out and say it that this is a hoax. Like, I
Right.
made this up. It's a story that I wrote. Now, even though he came out and said that, and I think that was what, 2000?
Yes.
2001?
Early
So,
2000. Yeah.
yeah. So this went on about 10 or 15 years before he came out and said, this is all false. But by that time, so many people had gotten involved in it and believed in it and were actually adding to the mythology of this legend that there were a lot of people who didn't believe him.
Yeah, I
They just
think.
said, yeah, good.
Well, what I was gonna say is like despite knowing now that it is a hoax, okay, despite knowing all of that, that everything that we just said about the egg and interdimensional travel and all that, um, that's all a hoax. Now, whether or not Ong's hat is named Ong's hat because some dude threw his hat at a tree, I don't know. I don't know if that's definitively not the right way. Anyways, um, but stuff regarding the legend, despite all of that being a hoax, I think it's almost more interesting that people don't believe it. That people, like you said, have been adding to the conspiracy, to this day. Um, for me, it was actually really hard to find an article about the Ong's hat theory that said that it was a hoax. A lot of them still take it serious. A lot of them still, um, they don't mention that this guy, Joseph Matheny, was the creator of it and he came out and said it was a hoax. They just kind of like leave it up to your own interpretation. And
Yeah.
I think that is more interesting to me, at least, than the theory as a whole, and the power that one story on the internet has to transform and evolve over the years to include so much more than this guy ever thought it would. Um, I think that's the interesting part.
Yeah, it is really cool how this kind of took on its own, like, became its own entity almost, right? So
Right.
this guy developed it, he started it, he kind of like fed the fire, but yeah, like you said, it kept on growing bigger, and even after he announced that it was a hoax, there were still people who believed and kept growing it. Um, and of course, the people who still believe are like, oh well, the government paid him to say that because they don't want people to know this exists,
Mhm.
or he has to keep it secret so he stays, or he has to say it's a hoax so he stays safe. Maybe there are people who don't like that he released all this information. So it's kind of like the typical conspiracy
Yeah.
like reasons behind doing that, but this essentially, if you believe uh the creator, if you believe that this is a hoax, then it's really the beginning of ARGs, so augmented reality games.
Mhm.
um and it's really cool how so many people got involved in this game.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, to take it to the point where they are camping out on his lawn and saying, "Hey, tell us what you know about Ong's hat. Tell us everything you know." Um, and this guy's like, "Dude, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Like it's done. It's over with. It's a hoax. I'm done." Um,
Yeah.
to take it that far to where they're camping out on his lawn, I mean, it's almost to the point of like stalkers. You know?
Yeah, people were angry. I mean, people were angry and super invested in this hoax. Yeah,
Yeah.
to the point where they were camping on his lawn or sending him mm, hate letters
Death. Yeah.
or like all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, like serious like threats. And
Yeah.
not only that, but like I said before, they're adding to this story. I
Mhm.
mean, people are saying that even just or reading about Ong's hat or the theory or watching a video about Ong's hat or the theory will cause you like discomfort, like you'll start getting
Yeah.
sick, you'll start feeling weird, you'll start seeing stuff. And it almost, even after the guy ends it, it almost takes on a life of its own, and it becomes like its own living, breathing theory of its own
Mhm.
because um, these people are so invested in it that they don't let it die, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, it has such
so,
an impact on them.
right,
If they are physically affected by reading this literature about the theory, then yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard not to be invested and curious in the theory.
I mean, for sure.
So,
And I
but
mean, go ahead.
I was gonna say, also to one of your earlier points, questioning, you know, the questioning whether the town name was actually legitimate or not, like the reasoning behind the town name. I think that's what made this story so engaging is because he actually I mean, he was mixing reality with fiction. So some of the content of in the pieces that he wrote, they're actually things that happened. I believe that the nuclear accident is actually something that was covered up by the New Jersey government for quite a while.
Hmm.
Um, so it's things like that that make it so engaging because you can't tell, you know, like where the real stuff ends and where the,
Right.
you know, fiction starts,
Right. You
but
can't see where that line's drawn.
yeah, but he also involved other local urban legends. So it was just it felt very real, I think, to the people reading it because they're like, "Oh yeah, I know about that. I know that," or I remember that happening,
Hmm.
and it just like draws them in.
Right. I mean, that's the best way to do it, right? If you want to make it seem as real as possible, you have to make it fantastical, but not so fantastical that it's out there.
Yeah.
Um, which I guess I guess you could make it really fantastical because somebody's going to believe you no matter what. Um, but to get the masses on your side, you have to make it seem like this is plausible. I remember
Mhm.
that, like you said, I remember that. I remember the nuclear reactor. I remember, the marker for the town or whatever that building. I've been there, um,
Mhm.
and so I guess that's the best way to do it is to make it as plausible as possible.
Yeah. So I think the guy, what is the guy's name who wrote this? I keep
Joseph
Joseph.
Matheny.
Yeah, so he put out 3, like, pretty large pieces of content, I think that are kind of like the pivotal pieces of this story, and he is a writer, and he's written other books, and I think that the after he came out and said this was all a hoax, he actually wrote a novel that I believe sort of it was like an introspection of, you know, internet phenomenon
Mhm.
based on this whole process, which is kind of cool. But the 3 pieces of content were the original pamphlet, um, the what is it? The
In
incunabula?
yeah, something like that. Incunabula.
Incunabula, which had like case files and like government reports and like interviews with people who supposedly grew up at Ong's Hat. And then towards the end of it all, when people were starting to add to this myth and it started growing almost out of control, he published what is it, Ong's Hat: The Beginning,
Right.
to
Yeah.
kind of like lasso everything back in because the story was getting so out of control, that it was like, look, here's the definitive collection of everything Ong's had. There's interviews, there's testimonials. Like this is the end all be all of Ong's Hat, and
Mhm.
anything else is like, you know, not correct.
Right.
So it's kind of neat to see the process of, you know, the beginning, you know, stoking the fire of this legend, kind of seeing him try to rope it in at the end, and then eventually he's just like, "All right, guys, it's a hoax. Like, let it
Yeah.
go."
Yeah. I mean, it just got so out of hand. Like I said, there were people adding to the story. Um, People adding to the story. They were making up new parts to the story, stuff that didn't,
Mhm.
had never been talked about, never been mentioned before. Um, and so I think in order to in order to somewhat keep his project, I guess we'll call it,
Mhm.
um, in order to keep it together and his own, he had to eventually make that final book on Ong's hat at the beginning, and you know these aren't like real testimonials. They're not real interviews. They're fake,
Mhm.
right? They're like they're scripted. They're staged. Um, and so I think that he had to make that in order to keep it his own, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
And
but
I think
even
that's
go ahead.
I don't know, like, I can't imagine coming up with this piece of fiction and seeing it grow like that. That would just be crazy to become like this phenomenon.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the power of the internet, right? I mean,
Mhm.
people they find something that they relate to, that they have a personal experience, or they've dealt with something similar, or something like that, and they latch onto it, and that one person turns into two people, those two people turn into four, and it grows exponentially until you have this group that are all throwing ideas on what this could be, what it was, everything, anything like that. They're throwing all that stuff into a big melting pot and seeing
Mhm.
what cooks out. And um, like I said, it's the power of the internet. You have kids in the areas to this day saying, like I said, they have weird feelings. They go searching for the things that have been talked about in these clearly fake books that the gentleman has said, hey, this is fake, you know, but they go
Mhm.
searching for it anyway because it's so ingrained in their culture of the area.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But it was I don't know, it's definitely a relic. I don't know if you could call it a relic. Maybe the original Ong's Hat storyline is definitely a relic of the early internet. And it's just it's also neat to see how I haven't been directly involved in any augmented reality games, but I know that like gaming companies will do them. I think there's one for Portal. I think there's one for
for Five Nights at Freddy's.
yeah, maybe Half-Life. But there are plenty that exist where, Easter eggs are hidden. People kind of follow this trail, go down this rabbit hole. Um, and so it I think that ARGs existed in a sense before the internet, but this really paved the way for these, online ARGs, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's it's essentially just one giant role playing game, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, it's a puzzle too. Yeah, it's like a puzzle role-playing game.
right? But I mean, instead of being like a tabletop, the the board is the entire, the world. It's Earth,
Mhm.
and so it's a very interesting concept, to think about how how you would take an idea, put it out into the world, and have that be the game, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's part of. I think that the gentleman Joseph Matheny, wanted it to grow into something similar to what it did grow into, but not what it did grow into. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it almost he couldn't it became something he couldn't control anymore.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
If you think of
And
him as like a dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons, he's no longer the top dog.
the
He's
players are just doing whatever they want.
right. They're just they're
Things are going
yeah.
crazy.
They're outside wrestling orcs for bread, and he's like, I don't even know how to control this anymore. This is not. I don't
Yeah.
know what this is going on.
Well, I think there comes a point too when you start this piece of fiction, you start a story and you wanna see it grow, but there has to be a stopping point, right? I mean, I guess either it could have just fallen into, the oblivion of the internet and just kind of fizzled out. Or, I mean, there would have had to have been a point, and I guess he reached it where it did grow so big that he had to cut it off. But I mean, it was supposed to be something fun. I mean, I think that was the intention. Something mysterious, something fun, and you know, I guess what I'm saying is eventually there had to be an ending point, whether it was him ending it or it fizzling out. But his intention was never to, let this live on
Mhm.
as a real urban legend.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder though what his ideal end game would have been, um, had it not grown to this giant mammoth theory that they still don't believe him to this day.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder what his ideal ending would have been,
Mhm. I don't
because
know. I
I,
mean,
I mean,
maybe it was just an experiment to see what would happen. Because that's like I said, his book after he called, named this as a hoax. His book after this was a deep dive into how the internet reacts to things, or
mhm.
how the internet reacted to this. So maybe it could be called more of an experiment. Maybe he just wanted to see what would happen.
Yeah, I thought I read somewhere that the book is being used in like psychological case studies on like how, um, the community interacts with each other and with like a prompt, you
Mhm.
know. Um, but I can't seem to find that now where I
So
read
it's
that.
the book is called This Is Not a Game: A Guide to Alternate Reality Gaming. So did he coin that phrase?
I'm not sure.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Um Well, so it says the term "arg" wasn't yet popular when he started posting about Ong's hat. Oh, so maybe he just adopted the terminology, when he wrote this book, because like I said, he announced that it was a hoax in 2000, and then this book came out in 2005. So he may have just adopted it,
Okay.
but he was calling it a living book experiment, apparently.
Okay.
Um, Says the way I used to describe this was it's like a role-playing game, but the board is not a table, it's the world.
I just said he stole it
Oh,
from
yeah,
me.
sorry.
He stole it from
Well,
me. You heard it here
you
first.
guys you guys can hear it again.
You heard it from me first, though. I said it first. He stole it from me.
Sorry. Yeah. So that's the living book experiment.
Hmm. Interesting.
So
I
yeah,
don't.
so then I guess my or if it's an experiment, it has to end at some point.
Right.
So there could have been multiple ways to end it, but it was just so popular that he had to actually come out and say, "Hey guys, this is not real." And
Right.
even then, people didn't believe him.
Right. I mean, it's
Yeah.
almost like, it almost has some similarities to the Slender Man. I don't know if you remember that internet sensation, uh,
Yeah.
years back, but it got to the point where, there were those two teenage girls that killed their friend,
Mhm.
and they said that it was because they were sacrificing her to Slender Man, like he told them they had to. So it's another one of those things where it's like people take it too far, and it was never meant to go that way, but it
Yeah.
just that's the power of the internet, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think creepypastas kind of skirt that line. Like there's some overlap between ARGs and creepypastas, right?
Oh,
A
for
little
sure,
bit.
for sure.
Because something like Slender Man obviously started out as a creepypasta, but then again, people started adding to the mythology of it and it becomes its own entity.
Right.
Um so then you start blurring those lines between, is this a game? Is this real? Are there some parts that are real, and some parts that aren't? So, especially if you're a kid,
Right.
and you know, you have to be careful about what you read on the internet.
Well, not only
Let this
that,
be a warning to those. Don't always trust what you read on the internet.
for sure, definitely don't do that. But also, it also begs the question. I guess it doesn't beg the question, but so I've always been a believer that like if you believe in things, you'll start to see them. So if you believe in ghosts and you actually want to see ghosts, you're going to find a ghost, right? Or if you believe um, that you're sick, you're going to start to feel like crap. Okay?
So you're talking about it in more of a like mind over matter kind of sense.
Yeah,
Like if you believe it hard enough,
I'm saying if you believe it hard enough, you're going to start thinking that the Slender Man is talking to you, or that
or
this
you're yeah.
egg is real.
So your brain is showing you what
Right,
it thinks you want to
right,
see.
right.
Yeah.
Well, it's no different than like you know compulsive liars who lie all the time. That's all they do is lie. They start to believe those lies, you
Mhm.
know, to the point where they're like they have a full story behind the lie. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, so
I,
go
yeah,
ahead.
and I think I know that there is a scientific explanation of why that happens. I actually just watched a video on it. It was a video on why our brains put patterns together when there might not be patterns, or why you see things or hear things that aren't actually there.
Hmm.
And so it's it's actually more of a survival tactic, right? So if you're walking outside and it's dark and you hear a noise or you see something, and you might think it's a ghost, right? Because that's what your brain is like making that connection.
Hmm.
It's actually because we're wired to err on the side of caution. So if we think something is scary, we're going to stay away from it. It might not be something dangerous, but it might be. And so we are wired to think that it's scary to err on the side of caution. I can't remember what that term is called,
Fair enough.
or that phenomenon, but it was really interesting.
Fair enough. I've
I
always
think that's
said
kind of what you're talking about, is if you, or it's kind of in the same vein, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, I've always said, don't be afraid of don't be afraid of the dark, be afraid of what's in the dark, right?
Right.
Because the dark can't hurt you. It's what's in the dark that can hurt you. And
Yeah.
so, if you believe that something's in the dark, that something's waiting to get you, you're you're gonna start believing that something's in the dark waiting to get you.
Yes.
So
But it ultimately keeps you safe because there actually may be something in the dark that's trying to get you.
that's true. There might be. That's true.
Yeah, also fight or flight kind of plays into that as well. Like if you think something is going to get you, you know. But yeah,
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting.
so
We took this internet hoax, and turned it into a more like psychological discussion on stuff, and that's nice. You know what I mean? Like that's
Mhm.
it's fun to be able to talk about more than just the theory itself.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, if you believe in the creator saying that this is a hoax, then just the fact that he was using this as an experiment of sorts, I
Mhm.
think is, you kind of have to talk about the psychological side, because that's really all it is this group of people, this phenomenon, the introduction of the internet causing this sensation.
Yeah.
But if you don't believe the creator, if you think he's been brainwashed or paid off by the government, then the myth itself is also just really cool. So you could really go either way, right?
Right.
Both sides of this story are equally interesting.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that the reason it took off so much, way beyond this guy ever thought it would, do you think the reason for that is because it was right there at the birth of the internet?
Um, I mean, I think it's just because the internet was there as a vehicle for it,
Hmm.
because there are still plenty of urban legends or creepypastas that spread across the internet now. I mean,
Right.
they still exist, arcs still exist, and plenty of people are involved in them. So I think it was just the vehicle, right? So there's
Okay.
this guy who's kind of like right place, right time. He already had this idea. He had, physical pamphlets. He's like, "Hey, the internet can do all these things. I can reach all these people." And he just like used that and ran with it. Now, I don't think it obviously it wouldn't have been as successful without the use of the internet because apparently there were people got things in the mail or in newspapers and like args is existed in physical formats before the birth of the internet. So
Hmm.
I was a kid. I mean, I grew up pre-internet,
Really?
but
You
I
were a
don't know
kid?
if I huh?
You were a kid? I thought you were
I
just born 30 years old.
I was I was born this way. I pooped distance at 30.
She was born yesterday, actually.
But I don't think I was old enough to engage in those sorts of things, you know?
Yeah. Interesting. Hmm.
So I don't know, what do you think?
Uh I think it's a combination of both. Honestly, I think you're right. The vehicle, the internet was there as a vehicle to help, fan the flames, so to speak. But I
Mhm.
also think that I'm not sure it would reach as large of an audience nowadays, because nowadays you have so many people that their first thought, their first response to anything is, "Oh, that's fake." Like, that's fake, and then they just keep on saying how it's fake. Um,
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's kind of like people weren't used to the ways of the internet or the way that the internet has become.
right. I
So
mean,
it's a little more innocent.
I think that if you get right there at the birth of the internet, you have these people that are like, "Oh man, this is really neat. Look at all this stuff I can find out. Look at all this stuff I can learn about," and they read it. And we didn't know back then that the internet was full of bullshit.
Right.
We because for us as kids growing up with the internet, it was a way to get any information you wanted at your fingertips.
Mhm.
You didn't need an encyclopedia because the encyclopedia was online.
Yeah.
um, and so I think it really helped being at the birth of the internet, because people took it as fact. They took it at face value instead of trying to find the deeper hoax that it was.
Yeah, that's true. I think I would agree with you on that. I hadn't thought about that. Um, but yeah, there were there were many internet lessons that we had not learned yet.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, kind of the right place, the right time, a new technology as the vehicle. Yeah, I think you're right. I think being there at that time did help it reach a larger. Well, I think that it could still maybe reach a large audience now, but I think that the amount of people that would actually believe it, those numbers would be a lot slimmer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, 100%. That's what I think.
Yeah.
But that's all I have. Do you have anything else?
No, I think we covered a lot of it. I just want to say if you guys are interested in um, hearing or reading more about this, there are all of, I mean, there's a huge amount of information actually associated with the Ong's Hat hoax.
Yeah.
So, if you go and look at all of the free stuff that's out there, the original pamphlet, the what is it called? Inculaculum or whatever.
Inculaba.
Whatever. Yeah, whatever it's
Inculabra.
called. Um, I mean, that document is out there. You can read it. So, if you wanna go down a really deep rabbit of Ong's Hat, then definitely check it out because there's a lot to the story that we didn't cover in this episode because
Yeah.
it would be a lot to cover.
I would say one piece of advice though, I would I would look up this theory, quote unquote theory, even knowing that it's a hoax, look it up on Google and see who or how many articles you can find that don't call it a hoax, that don't
Yeah.
mention that it was, fake. Because I'm telling you, there's a lot. There's a lot
Yeah.
of articles and websites that kind of leave it up to your own interpretation, which is really neat because, like I said, I didn't know until Biscuit told me that it was a hoax and sent me a video. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I was ready to be like, oh man, I'm in on this. Let's go. But, like, look it up because that to me is an interesting aspect that even though the guy has come out and said it's a hoax, even though there are websites that you can find that say it's a hoax, a lot of the websites don't talk about it.
Yeah. Also, on a similar note, if you guys are interested in this kind of stuff, I don't know if they're technically ARGs, they might be called something else, but there are a lot of like spooky Twitter accounts where you're kind of like walked through this story that's seemingly real. Twitter is great for that, and YouTube. There are a lot of like spooky YouTube accounts that create entire narratives or storylines around. I don't. They're kind of all over the place, but essentially spooky things with hidden messages, secret text. People try to solve puzzles in these videos or on these Twitter accounts. So if you're interested in them, definitely check out those avenues as well, because I feel like they're kind of more modern day versions of this.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat. I came across some of those the other day.
Yeah. And, um, Twitter is, like you said, it's a really good one for it because you only get snippets, right, at a time. Because it's what, 70 characters or 140 characters, something like that on
Mhm.
Twitter. And so it's not like a movie where you're like watching it and it progresses like, you know, it progresses constantly. It's like, it kind of like, it's like in hits, right?
Mhm.
So
It's like a
it
story over time.
right. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of like feeding you information, but it's not, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense? Like it's feeding you the information, but it's at a slower pace so you can like process it and kind of like put yourself in there.
You get more involved in it,
Right.
more
Thank you.
invested. Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, that's all I have. I guess my last comment is if you guys have myths, urban legends, conspiracies, anything similar that you want us to talk about, you can always send them to either me or Tin Man
Yep.
via Twitch, Discord, social media. What is our
Twitter.
social
Yep.
media handle?
All that stuff. What? What did you say?
What is our social media handle?
At TinBiscuit R
TinBiscuit R.
on Twitter, and then Gmail is TinBiscuit Reviews at gmail.com.
Yep. So we're always looking for cool and interesting things.
Yes, we
So,
are always looking for new ideas to talk about. If there's a specific one, like you said, that you want to hear us talk about, make sure to reach out because we'll more than as long as it's not like super out there. You know what? No, even if it is super out there, we'll probably listen. We'll probably take a listen and talk about it. I mean, we talked about the time
yeah.
cube for crying out loud.
Yeah, and I'll check that one out.
But
The
other than that, I have nothing else. Biscuit, I appreciate you being my co-host.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, and thank you guys for hanging out and listening to us talk about spooky things. Hope to see you at our next episode.
Yep. Have a good one, guys.
All right, thanks, Sin Man.
Bye.